My name is Juliet Boon-Nanai. I'm originally from Samoa. I have Chinese heritage as well. As I introduced myself a little bit earlier, I am a product of both the colonization and the post-colonial times. Yeah. So I want to start, if I may, Jeanette and Maddie and Peter, I want to read out Dr. Jacopa's little poem to start with, because I think it links very nicely the themes, the relational theme, and the ideas of differences, ways of knowing and learning, and also my presentation. And since she's not here, I will take over her poetry and try to do justice to be very poetic. Now, this issue is like decolonizing the ways of knowing. And Dr. Jacopa has this title on, she wrote a poem in her paper, "What knowledge does the academic institution produce?" Colonial legacies stitched together the global knowledge economy with concealed threads. Capitalizing on knowledge, suppliers compete. Bright and alluring packaged material, stitching, education, supply and demand, education for learning and unlearning of localized wisdom, globalizing the local fabric of being, formulating globally standardized pedagogies for teaching and learning, decontextualized to place, space, and the threads that bind relationship, politicizing Pacific intersubjectivity as failure. So that's the introduction. I want to start my presentation to link hers to mine. First of all, Talo Falava, Kia ora, and Pasifika greetings. I present this paper on behalf of our colleagues, namely Theo Manuel, he's of Palangi and Cook Island heritage, Wesley Langolango and Tainafi Lefono, both Samoan heritage boys, Vedant Saveri is of Indian heritage, Sauniuni Seleni is of Samoan heritage, and a colleague who was a lecturer in our methods of research paper, Dr. Vauipa Ponten, who now resides in Brisbane, Australia. This paper was part of a bigger study that has already been published in the Sociology Journal with using a mixed method approach. But we filter out this particular area or part of the research because we wanted to highlight the voices of these male students, because in the Talanoa sessions or the conversational exchanges, they highlighted the culture of silence. How in a lecture room, sometimes the lecturer poses questions and some of them don't reply. There are already studies in the secondary schools that have highlighted how the culture of silence is viewed as a hindrance to learning, because, for instance, in the science classroom, boys will not answer because, one, they are afraid they would be told off for being smarty pants or fiapoko. And of that, if they reply, the answer might be wrong and they might be shamed by their peers, or whether it was right to answer so as not to upset the respectful boundaries, not challenging the lecturer or the teacher. And that is why the title was noted as Re-examining the Culture of Silence through a Peer-Based Pasifika Pedagogy from the views of these students. Silence is not necessarily being fiapoko, being a smarty pants, not necessarily not wanting to answer because we might get the wrong answers or be shamed upon, not necessarily being silent in the lecture room because you're being embarrassed or being a passive learner. However, some of our students are first migrants, and one of them in this research was a second migrant. And it's about knowing their place and maintaining the respectful, harmonious relationships between the knowledge holder, which might be the lecturer, and the process of knowledge transference. So when the knowledge is being brought upon, there is the expectation that you are to observe, listen carefully, because that was the oratory tradition of handing down information. And to capture that, you have to be privileged in that circle to be gifted that knowledge. And in general, there's a lot of documentation of the Pasifika students' achievement rates, and it's always very challenging. Always it's always not good. However, we notice that this peer-based Pasifika pedagogy not only maintain high completion rate, but also retention rates. The physiotherapy school here in the Faculty of Health has the highest retention rates of 97%. It's never gone down below 97%. And in this year, when we did this research, it actually achieved 100%. So out of all the schools, the physiotherapy Pasifika students' achievement, completion, and retention rate has actually maintained quite a high rate, which sometimes they outnumber the other cohorts, which is the Maori and the Asian cohorts, as well as the Palangi students. So this is why we wanted to capture the success stories and the strength-based pedagogy. Now there are about 4 or 5, and I've kind of like highlighted some of them. And first of all is about making the connections. Now, I deliberately didn't put the VA as my subject topic here, the VA relationship, because as Dr. Jacoba wrote in, she actually spelled out the VA very nicely. It's about the relationship between the cosmos, the land, and the people. And therefore, this VA, there's always, when we talk about the relationship between the cosmos, it's always a sacred relationship. And one of our ex-head of state says, we always recall what our ancestors has said, those who were the knowledge holders before us. So we always, if there's no consensus of reaching any arguments or any solution, he says, we sleep and we go and consult our ancestors. So that is, how do you say, a little bit of a understanding of how the Vatapuia, or the sacred relationship, is acknowledged. And then we have the Va between the people, the Va Tangata, the Va between the brother and the sister, the covenant. And then, so we try to harmonize. So if you are the knowledge holder, our students are not being passive learners. They are actually trying to capture as much as they want. So I want to void that argument that it is not a hindrance to their learning. Now, the engagement are in different levels. So once, and because these students were selected as student leaders in a cultural space, we call it the learning villages. And, you know, it takes a village to raise a child. And the first thing they do is always open up with a prayer. Now, I didn't say this because I think Jacoba captured that relationship, the Tapuiava, very well. And after that, one would introduce, and Jacoba also started her paper with the acknowledgement of your genealogy, and same with Dr. Janet. You always acknowledge your whanua, where you are from, the land where your heritage is from. So they would ask, are you from, so instead of village, because we're not living in the villages, they would say, okay, you're from here and here, the school, I know. So your last name, like the Nai name, will always come from a particular clan in the political districts of Samoa. So if Tuila Epa, which is like the ex prime minister, it would come from a certain political district. So if these students have certain Pacific heritage names, and because these students have actually been engaged with other Pacifica students, there's always some kinship ties. I know your uncle, I know you, he was my teacher. So they make those connections right from the start before they even start looking at the curriculum, the content. And it's a conversation that we call the talanoa. And one of the Tongan ladies have actually spelt out that the talanoa has to be ma'alie, humorous, fun, and mafana, warm. So they have these connections that they have to establish right from the start. And I think I highlighted 3 different ways of connecting. And then once you have that connection, you have to establish and to make sure you maintain them. And sometimes one of or two of the students would fall off, but knowing them, knowing the sometimes their background, their family situations, because all of them, this is another part of the engagement, sharing the stories of why you are here. Uh, we come for opportunities, some come for medical reasons, and those narratives get how do you say shared among the students, and there's some kind of relational ties between, because now they trust each other. It's okay to reveal other personal elements which is so helpful along their journey. So if one falls off because mom has gone to the hospital and or father has dialysis, they know exactly how to make it up to them to make sure they're up to date with their learning or whatever assessment topics that they need, or even guide them that you have to put in special consideration application so that they won't, how do you say, the deadlines can be met on time, so they don't need to be penalized for not submitting the assessments. Um, and I have to say that Jacopa also published something about the digital VAR. She's actually like touch all 4 corners of the world. And I think these boys have actually were ahead of their time, because they use social media as a means to then connect with the others to make sure that the conversation and the talanoa is still ongoing through the content knowledge, and also whatever aspect, whether it's to do with the diagrams, whether it's to do with knowing and because physiotherapy, they look at a lot of these skeletons. There's like skeletons everywhere in the phono rooms and the whānau rooms. This is where they open it up to others, and there's no shame. There's no holding back, because sometimes they first have the Facebook before they have the face-to-face, because it takes a while to develop confidence to actually even the arts of questioning. Some of them don't even know how to pose a question. Some of them still don't know how to do APA referencing, and it's always embarrassing if you don't know. But if one knows that the other one doesn't know, coming in a group, it's like when I used to locate myself. See, the Auckland University publish and spend a lot of money on pamphlets to actually say, come to the support areas. Well, when I started this role of equity academic 13 years ago, on my 4th year, I'm a Pasifika person. I did not see any brown students. I took myself to them. I located myself to the phono room because that was their safe place. So you see, you take the education to them rather than waiting for them to come and look for you. So it's always the other way around. So one is like holding your hand, holding the hand, and it's like those clinical doctors where, oh, come, yeah, I take you to the doctor. So it's the similar way of engagement. So they have Facebook, which is first online, and then later on they have the face-to-face. And these students, because we put them through a teacher assistant training, they like take ownership. They take ownership and they become very creative. They use the narratives, analogies. A lot of us, even one of our co-authors who's doing a law paper, he uses analogies all the time to try to understand why the mental health law does not cater, and yet it says Pasifika. Why are we still window dressing for Pasifika in mental health? But you see how they change the knowledge and process it in a cultural way so that they can understand how certain, how you say, a phrase or how a certain content knowledge is being presented in the text. So, and all during this, and that's why I said it's in a circular way. It's not even like phases. Because they overlap. They always have the knowledge, the food and the humor to go with it. And these students always feel that the knowledge that they have actually handed down has to be shared as well. It's not for them to hold because they feel that they are practicing servant leadership. It's to share for everybody's benefit. It's very communal, very reciprocal. It's a mutual way of actually knowing that you are here with me because you are here as well to make sure that the outcome is our standard of living for your family will be raised once you get this knowledge. So, and that's why I use the words, the gift of knowledge, it was a way to honor how they actually help these students, because the wraparound support that they gave these students actually went to other family members. So the participation rate was from 9 to 14, it jumped to 27, because the allied health is not something that is well promoted within the families. It's always nursing or doctor, nursing or doctor. Being an occupational therapist, being a podiatrist, being a physiotherapist is not really popular among the Pacific Island families. So once these students got this knowledge and felt very engaging, the participation rates within the physiotherapy schools and the paramedicine used to be 111. Now we've got like 10 students in paramedicine. It's like a triple down effect, a domino effect, because the wraparound support from our students kind of like duplicated in other schools. So Jacopa, Dr. Jacopa has also wrote something about the family as a pedagogy within early childhood education, the partnership between the school, the communities, and the family. So this is also something that was raised by the Pacifica physiotherapy students, that they learn in a community, they learn communally, they learn collectively, and it's like no. I think one of those goals in American schools is no child left behind, and that's why this in Maori they say whanaungatanga. This whanaungatanga principle is very important in this way of learning. So, what are the outcomes? Well, I kind of look at all the learning theories, and there's the one on constructivism and connectivism. And I think those elements of associative, cognitive, and situative learning, it blends in very well with these pedagogical elements. And what is very important, because Pacifica peer-based pedagogies is about the integration of the, how do you say, the Pacifica worldviews, and validating them as also a knowledge that can be used in learning and in teaching and learning. And it's part of cultural intelligence, being culturally competent. And these students, because they breathe it, they live it, they actually practice it. So it was like, it wasn't something that they kind of how do you say, you have to use a book, and I think we noted that in our publication, that when you go to the House of Chiefs, you don't take a book and a pencil. Everything has to be all your oratory, and you have to take it all in. And so it's very similar to how I saw these students work with other students. And like I said in the beginning, the retention and completion rates was 100% in this particular. So these pedagogies, like, it's so important, because my son, he's in year 13, and I said, "Are you going to University of Auckland?" I don't know how he got stories or narratives from other students. They said, "Auckland University of Technology, I heard, is more engaging. I'm coming to AUT." So the important aspect is that they don't have to leave their identity and sense of belonging, their Pacifica-ness at home, and come learn the Western way. They can navigate through the Western way using their Pacifica-ness. So on that note, for policy and management, I think these pedagogies should be promoted as business as usual practice. And the good thing about AUT is that in their key strategic objective 10, they actually noted down to create learning that is conducive for Pacifica communities. The key strategic objective 9 is for Maoris. However, on an operational level, you need the resources to actually roll this out, because we didn't want to, how do you say, exploit these students. We actually gave them some compensation for their time, because they are actually the lecturers who were invited to these food circles. They were amazed how these students, they were like real teacher assistants, high employed in the faculties. They were doing a marvelous job. And thank you very much. So that is the Pacifica peer-based pedagogies. Thank you, Fafdai.